This morning, an executive decision finalized months ago is translating into empty shelves and shuttered doors across 3 distinct Montreal neighborhoods. By the close of business on July 17th, Walmart Canada will have terminated operations at its Côte-des-Neiges, Pointe-aux-Trembles, and Dorval locations, a sequenced retreat that officially began with the first closure June 19th. This cluster of closures, impacting over 330 employees and thousands of price-sensitive households, would seemingly indicate a major market correction for the world's largest retailer within Quebec. To understand the strategic recalculation underway, one must look past the immediate operational footprint being erased and toward the capital being deployed simultaneously. While closing these 3 outlets, Walmart is concurrently executing a $150 million investment in Quebec this fiscal year alone, financing 18 separate store renovations and constructing a new supercenter in Sherbrooke. This provincial activity is itself a component of a $6.5 billion national investment strategy, the largest single expansion in the company's 30-year Canadian history. The divergence between store closures and record capital expenditure reveals that this is not a retail retreat, but a fundamental high-stakes restructuring of asset allocation. The foundational element common to all 3 shuttered Montreal locations is that they were leased spaces, integrated into aging retail plazas like Plaza Côte-des-Neiges and Jardins Dorval, rather than corporate-owned properties. This detail illuminates the entire strategy. Walmart Canada is aggressively pivoting away from landlord-controlled environments toward a real estate model it owns and dominates completely. When optimizing for physical ownership, the retailer secures absolute control over the 2 critical vectors of modern high-volume retail: physical layout and complex logistics infrastructure. The physical constraints inherent in a 1990s-era strip mall leased unit make it functionally impossible to implement necessary architectural changes, such as cutting specialized grocery pickup bays or expanding cold chain storage for online order fulfillment. These legacy sites possess hard limitations that clash with the data-driven demands of modern omnichannel commerce. Walmart is abandoning these specific buildings, not because they are unprofitable, but because they are structurally obsolete in the face of rapid consumer behavioral shifts, with delivery now standard in as fast as 2 hours across Montreal. Fulfilling that level of demand requires dedicated internal logic, space for specialized order pickers, refrigerated staging zones, and streamlined loading access for delivery fleets. Elements that cannot simply be bolted onto a discount box store designed a quarter-century ago. The strategic priority has shifted entirely from maximizing sheer storefront numbers to maximizing fulfillment speed and digital physical convergence. The physical replacement for these outdated nodes, as exemplified by the incoming 140,000 square foot Sherbrooke Supercenter, is a fundamentally different class of retail operation built on vertical integration from the blueprints up. Beyond stocking a comprehensive grocery department and full general merchandise, these supercenters integrate sophisticated, purpose-built infrastructure for online order pickup and home delivery right into the initial floor plan. This modernization push is not unique to Quebec. The company opened its technologically advanced fulfillment center in Vaughan, Ontario, in 2025 and has 5 more massive supercenters slated for completion by 2027 in locations including Calgary and Hamilton. What the scale of that $6.5 billion figure reveals is that Walmart's modernization campaign, following an earlier $3.5 billion cycle, now prioritizes systemic supply chain and technology infrastructure over simple storefront acquisition. Yet, this corporate optimization creates an immediate and severe friction point within the communities that rely on the discount model these legacy stores provided. Côte-des-Neiges, for example, is among the most densely populated, diverse neighborhoods in Montreal, a place where immigrant families, students, and seniors on fixed incomes chose that specific Walmart because it was the only affordable grocery anchor accessible without a car. When the lowest cost grocery option in a price-sensitive urban center is deactivated, those households are immediately exposed to significant economic vulnerability. Food prices across Canada are already 27% higher than they were just 5 years ago, with the average family of 4 projected to spend an additional $1,000 on groceries in 2026. Data from Dalhousie University shows food is now the leading inflationary pressure for 81% of Canadians, forcing 34% of households to draw on savings or take on debt to maintain basic nutrition. When that affordable switch is eliminated, the resulting gap between corporate strategy and local food security is a point of acute tension. Walmart's standard operational response, pointing affected customers to alternate locations like nearby Ville Saint-Laurent or the Saint-Antoine Supercentre, and highlighting 2-hour home delivery, exposes a deep misalignment between corporate scale and the physical geometry of urban poverty. Nearby is a friction-filled concept for a senior navigating winter public transit with heavy bags, and high-speed delivery relies on prerequisite access to a smartphone, data plan, and credit card that are not equally distributed across all demographics. This fundamental economic tension between the undeniable efficiency of retail centralization and the hyper-local need for affordable food access is the defining logistical battleground of modern grocery consolidation. As older department store models like Hudson's Bay collapse into restructuring, and the top 4 grocery chains consolidate control over 72% of the Canadian market, the pressure to optimize physical space is relentless. While Walmart optimizes for real-time pricing via digital shelf labels and AI shopping assistants, communities are optimizing for their next meal. For Walmart, the logic of sacrificing a leased 1990s floor plan for a corporate-owned fulfillment hub is sound. But for the family in Côte-des-Neiges, the primary question remains: how are they supposed to get there? The friction established by Walmart Canada's mid-2026 consolidation highlights a widening rift between corporate efficiency and localized economic survival. On one hand, the optimization of logistics demands the abandonment of structurally rigid, leased retail spaces in favor of owned, digitally integrated distribution nodes. On the other hand, the human geography of dense urban centers demands proximate, low-cost food access during a period of unprecedented domestic inflation. Resolving this tension requires looking past local complaints and analyzing the macroeconomic and corporate shifts driving this capital relocation. RetailInsider.com. The executive intent behind this restructuring becomes clear when reviewing the official justifications provided by corporate leadership. Steve Azoulay, Walmart Canada's Senior Director of Public Affairs, framed the closures as an unavoidable operational evolution, stating that although these decisions are never easy, they are part of ongoing efforts to ensure the company is meeting the evolving needs of its customers and positioning the business for continued growth in Quebec. What this corporate response reveals is a deliberate choice to prioritize systemic, tech-enabled scalability over legacy geographical presence. By defining evolving needs through the lens of data-driven infrastructure rather than physical proximity, leadership signals that a location's value is no longer measured by local foot traffic, but by its capacity to integrate into a centralized digital network. That strategic pivot structurally redefines the baseline requirement for a profitable asset within the Canadian retail environment. WWCTVnews.ca. This corporate repositioning is taking place against a backdrop of severe domestic food inflation that has dramatically altered consumer shopping patterns across the country. According to the Bank of Canada's 2025 financial reviews, cost pressures working through the supply chain since late 2024 pushed food inflation to 5% by December 2025, significantly outpacing core consumer price indexes. That economic squeeze means lower-income households are now forced to allocate more than 27% of their disposable income purely to groceries, compared to just 5% for affluent families. This stark statistical divide demonstrates why the loss of a neighborhood discount anchor creates immediate regional instability. What this macroeconomic squeeze does structurally is funnel a massive wave of price-sensitive shoppers toward digital platforms, accelerating the very e-commerce transition Walmart is spending billions to dominate. To handle this influx of digital demand, the infrastructure layout must change entirely. moving away from public-facing aisles toward high-throughput automated staging areas. In 2025, Walmart operationalized its most advanced automated distribution center in Vaughan, Ontario, specifically to anchor its next-generation supply chain matrix. That facility utilizes automated storage and retrieval systems to process up to 4,500 cases per hour, a dramatic increase over manual fulfillment speeds. This shift tells you that the modern storefront is increasingly becoming a secondary feature of an underlying logistics machine. The long-term implication is a retail landscape where physical stores operate primarily as regional transit nodes for algorithmic home delivery rather than community shopping centers. Furthermore, this capital-intensive modernization is being accelerated by an aggressive technological overhaul, spearheaded by the highest levels of corporate leadership. Following the transition of executive power to John Furner in February 2026, the company rapidly expanded its digital integration, committing to install digital shelf labels across 2,300 North American locations by the end of 2026 to facilitate dynamic, real-time pricing adjustments. This initiative was paired with an OpenAI collaboration enabling instant checkout via artificial intelligence assistance. Alongside the deployment of Sparky, an AI shopping assistant capable of autonomously reordering household goods. That rapid integration of algorithmic management tools reveals a strategy focused on eliminating human labor overhead and transaction friction from the fulfillment cycle. The future consequence of this deployment is an autonomous pricing and supply model that responds instantly to wholesale market shocks, completely uncoupled from the sticky, traditional pricing expectations of local consumer populations. The aggressive nature of this restructuring is further intensified by the rigid competitive dynamics defining the broader domestic grocery market. The Canadian grocery landscape is structurally a tight oligopoly, with the top 4 major retail conglomerates controlling at least 72% of the national market share. In such a highly consolidated environment, revenue growth cannot easily be achieved through market expansion, forcing operators to compete strictly on marginal operational efficiency and cost reduction. This structural reality explains why Walmart is willing to absorb the local reputational damage of shutting down 3 active urban storefronts in a single summer. What this corporate maneuvering demonstrates is that in a mature oligopoly, maintaining an inefficient physical asset is a greater long-term liability than yielding localized geographic territory to regional competitors like Metro or Loblaws. This optimization campaign ultimately exposes a significant policy void at the intersection of municipal city planning and corporate capital flight. While the Quebec economy recorded a modest real GDP growth of just 0.8% in 2025, the consolidation of its 32,000 retail establishments has disproportionately hollowed out the commercial foundations of low-income urban neighborhoods. When a massive anchor tenant like Walmart evacuates a leased plaza, the vacancy triggers an immediate decline in secondary foot traffic, frequently resulting in a cascading failure of adjacent pharmacies, local service providers, and small businesses. This pattern demonstrates that public food security and urban economic stability remain deeply dependent on private corporate real estate strategies designed without local civic obligations in mind. The structural outcome of this dependency is the emergence of artificial food deserts within major metropolitan zones, shifting the logistical and financial burden of food access entirely onto the municipality and the individual citizen. RetailInsider.com. The ultimate trajectory of this strategic transformation now hinges on how effectively the urban, consumer-based transitions to the centralized digital model. The immediate test of this thesis will occur in the coming months, as winter conditions intersect with the complete closure of the Dorval facility on July 17th. Whether vulnerable urban demographics will successfully migrate to the online, 2-hour delivery ecosystem, or whether they will drift to rival brick-and-mortar discounters, remains the single critical variable that will validate or compromise Walmart's high-stakes real estate gamble. The strategic maneuvering analyzed across Walmart Canada's operations reveals that navigating this consolidation requires synthesizing local real estate choices with broad corporate mandates. The restructuring is not an isolated tactile response to localized urban challenges, but an execution of macroeconomic asset reallocation. By shifting capital from inefficient, leased infrastructure into high-yielding, corporate-owned networks, the retailer is actively establishing the baseline conditions for the next era of mass distribution for the primary actors involved. This evolution establishes explicit strategic imperatives that rewrite the rules of market engagement. Within Canada, the consolidation of the grocery market into a tight oligopoly means that regional competitors must now match this capital-intensive automation or risk structural obsolescence. The traditional reliance on physical footprint density is being rapidly replaced by a requirement for deep, algorithmic supply chain control. For the broader retail ecosystem, including major distribution partners across North America and automated technology providers globally, this transformation sets off a race to deploy capital into infrastructure that completely bypasses historical municipal frameworks. The structural reality is that corporate survival now dictates the elimination of friction, even if that friction includes the physical geometry of traditional neighborhood commerce. Looking forward, the immediate next moves will see an intensification of this data-driven consolidation across all major distribution hubs. Walmart is already expanding its automated footprint nationally, shifting the center of gravity away from urban storefronts toward massive, centralized facilities designed for high-velocity algorithmic fulfillment. This means the retail landscape will continue to bifurcate into highly advanced suburban fulfillment centers and marginalized urban zones lacking direct corporate investment. The long-term trajectory is a market where physical accessibility is treated as a premium digital service rather than a geographic default. This entire structural pivot reveals that the true value of a modern retail asset is no longer determined by its physical proximity to a local consumer base, but by its capacity to function as an autonomous, high-throughput logistics node. The closure of the Montreal storefronts and the simultaneous deployment of a $6.5 billion national investment framework are not contradictory actions. They are identical expressions of a singular strategy that prioritizes systemic network efficiency over local community presence. In this new paradigm, geographic real estate is systematically optimized for the flow of digital capital, leaving traditional urban centers to absorb the socio-economic fallout of corporate flight. Ultimately, this restructuring demonstrates that in the modern economy, scale no longer adapts to the city. The city is forced to adapt to the scale of the network.